Okay, we've got the Wingnut Wings 1/32 scale. This is the Roland C2 late kit. We've reviewed Wingnut Wings before. We're massive fans of them and all the rest of it. Really, what can you say? Brilliant kits and everything else. And the one thing you notice for this kit weighs a ton. Really, really heavy. But usual thing, as we come to expect, we have beautiful box art down on here. Very interesting markings that they've chosen to do in this one. And the usual call out. So down in here, you've got obviously for the actual aircraft you can do. Right the way through. I won't name off now because obviously we'll have a look at the book. Usual thing with the box. Lovely done. And everything else like that. And the biggest thing you always notice with a Wings kit, it is absolutely rammed, chock solid with sprues. Okay, so what we'll do, we'll have a quick delve into the bits at the bottom. Okay, and we'll make our way through. So, usual thing, I'm not going to get all this out because we know it's amazingly brilliant. Okay, so we're just going to call out the other things. So, as you can see, we have got if we do a close-up, we've got the shark mouth down in here for these various markings as you go through right the way through and everything else. Then obviously we've got the placards and the various detailed bits down the end. As I say, there's not a lot of point getting them out. If you haven't used them before, beautiful decals, they go down a treat and everything else. So, down here in the book, as you can see, we've actually got, we get this all lined up for you. Usual thing, the call outs, usual thing, they're going to be, if they haven't changed, let me check before I make a complete fool of myself. Okay, and yeah, so going to be call outs in the actual colours themselves, as I say, so it's going to be A and all the way through. So you've got the usual thing, Tamiya, Humbrol, and you've got your FS Federal Standard colours as well, right the way through. Recently, we'll say recently, over the last few years, they've released loads, okay? So what's happening now is you're tending to get the variants of coming out. Obviously, this is the late version, hence you've got quite a lot of blue in here, blue being denoting it's an unused part, so you won't be using those parts, all right? But usually what happens is, and I think it's probably in the case here, you've got the situation where not a lot is used, so they've added a couple of extra sprues to it. And then using generic parts as you make your way through. You always get a little bit of photo etch with it, but if you've never seen a Wingnut Wings kit before, the first thing you'll notice, obviously looking here at the instructions, is the beautifully laid out and illustrated, as well as reference photos as well, of the actual aircraft you're making. So, as you can see, absolutely lovely done. So we've got the usual things, starting with the cockpit, the seats, the fuel tank, things like that, all actually going into this one. Some very nice reference photos, very nice call outs as you're making your right the way through. You do get the skeleton of the aircraft, the actual structure of the aircraft as well. As with all the Wingnut Wings kits, again, beautifully done and everything else as it goes through. The thing you have to notice, you will know if you've never built one before, is the actual superb engineering of these kits. You know, I don't have to tell you how this kit will go together. I know it will go together flawlessly with no problems at all because they are that well done, okay? So looking right the way through here, just be careful when you're painting some of the areas together. If you're heavy-handed with your paints, that's when it can affect things like the actual geometry of things and getting fuselage halves together, or perhaps if you're using some wiring and things like that around here, if you get them on the outside and you get a sandwich effect, then you get things don't line up. Anyway, moving down, so we got here the Daimler-Benz engine, beautifully detailed, everything else like that. You can obviously liven it up yourself with a little bit more wire, various things like that, but we got some very nice reference shots down here at the bottom as well, talking about it. And then obviously it'd be mounting it to the actual fuselage, and as I said, you get lovely little shots like this little picture down the bottom here of a crash one. Right the way through. So you know the research into these is absolutely phenomenal. It goes right the way through. The other thing you have to watch out for when you're building these as well is what version of the kit you're doing, because obviously if you're doing versions like A, B and C, D and E, there is the slight differences. You know, just pay attention to your call outs as you make your way through, because you do have to drill out holes for adding details and things like that to make sure you get the right version that you're doing. Again, more details as you see going down in here, talking about cutting off little tiny bits, making little authorizations to it and going in. So as you can see, starting to go down now, opening up the holes and everything, getting the wings fitted on, the tailplanes on, the braces, and then again working right your way through. Calling out, obviously control surfaces, putting those on, the control horns, things like that. Okay, Engine work, fine details, always a little tricky one to do this, is actually getting that nice and symmetrical right the way around. Best to get yourself a piece of plastic card, or not card, but tubing, something else like that, wrapping it around it, get it all precise, and then putting it all together. Because as I said, if you're not precise with it, it doesn't go together very nicely. You can buy, they're actually 3D metal printed guns for these things. I can't remember the company's name now, but they do them and they are absolutely beautifully done. Propellers, so that's one thing we were talking about here. So obviously different versions, A through D use one type, the E obviously has a different type of propeller. Going right the way through, nice and close-ups here for the actual exhaust system and with that gun. Okay, and then obviously we've got the rear gun mounted, and talking about obviously how that all feeds through and everything else. Rigging, okay, you know, obviously my favourite job. You can see here on the close-up, luckily with this one there isn't much to it. Being a later version, rigging was on its way out by that point. They had managed to come up with other options. And then usual thing, you got your references for each one. So each particular aircraft will have a full little bit about it, the colour call-outs and everything else like that, usually a photo of it, one or two, and then going right the way through. So as you can imagine, nice load of colour call-outs and options there, okay, and even obviously, so, you know, it's amazing some of the reference photos these guys get a hold of, absolutely beautifully published and everything else. And again, you know, things like that, nice little diorama to think about in there. Okay, and obviously the team behind it, beautifully done. It's like a construction book rather than instructions for it. It's like a manual for putting it all together, and beautifully done. So one of the big things I always loved about Wingnut Wings is the way that they've managed to come up with a way of producing very large sprues just like this. Okay, but if you look at it, there is a distinct lack of ejector pin marks on it. Okay, how these guys get them out the actual molds is beyond me, because you've got these huge wing areas like these here. You might be able to see there's no ejector pin mark around it. The ejector pins are all here, here and here, but even on here there's not. There's plenty on the tree to stamp them out, but even the way, you know, the texture and absolutely everything on these wing sets is absolutely beautifully done. You've got the ribbing showing through, it's got a texture of fabric already, so when you obviously add your paint, you're good to go. Things you will notice, you won't see much flash on these. Occasionally you get a tiny little bit. We've got a little tiny bit on here, but you wouldn't worry about it. As you can see, you've got a beautiful one down there. You know, it's just the engineering is very well done. It's like a modeler would build it, because obviously you wouldn't put ejector pin marks where you don't want them. And obviously this is where they come together and they think about these. And yes, I did stab myself in the finger. Alright, so on Sprue G we've got these propellers, as you can see down here, obviously very slight differences between them, between the actual shape and things like that. We've actually got a little step ladder as well, which is quite a nice touch. We've got obviously starting cartridges, flare guns, things like that to go in here. There's obviously quite a lot of stowage in this one. A little bit of radio equipment, I take it. Will be early radio equipment on these, but generally as we just have a shuffle around the sprue, you can see beautifully done. Even the smallest parts like here and things like that, no real sign of flash, no kind of stress getting them out of the mold or absolutely anything. Okay, and we haven't actually got any sink marks as such in the propellers. We've got a tiny little one just down in this guy here, but the others haven't got any sink marks in them at all whatsoever, which is a very nice touch. So down in here we've got the actual engines themselves. Okay, so again, when you're building these Daimler engines and putting them all together, as you can see, beautifully done. More propeller options on this sprue as well, so we've got more of them on here. But again, just remember, you're not going to be using everything on here. Okay, but as you can see, some very nice details for the engine and for the exhaust manifolds, things like that as it comes out. Very nicely done. No problem with that at all. Again, I'm looking for faults, if I'm honest. I'm trying to find one, I can't find one. They are phenomenally well done. I won't get this little guy out of the sprue, but basically we've got the guns here. So as I said, you've got the machine guns, the defence guns for the aircraft. Okay, clear parts again, there's not a little point getting these out. They are beautifully done. We've got no problems with those again. That's just going to be another one. Okay. And as I say, some of these I'm not going to bother getting out. A classic example is that one there. We've got the wheel, so you've actually got the tyre, and then we've got the two hubs each side of it, as you can see, no problem at all. And this is the main frame, or the spar between both the wings, very nicely done. As I said, you can't fault any of that whatsoever. Okay. this little guy down here, you've got the floor for the actual fuselage itself. Okay, again, more guns and things like that. Some of this framework, okay, right the way through. The exhausts, again, the actual types of manifolds there coming off of those, very nicely done. I presume this is to the rear for the tail, for the actual rudder set as well, down on there. Very nicely done. No sign of any problems with that at all. You know, we have got ejector pin marks on these, don't get me wrong. There isn't anywhere, you know, obviously this is an inside part, you're going to see it, but they are all recessed, so you're not going to have any problems with them going together like that. That's a duplicate of the other one. Let's have a look at this guy. This is the actual fuselage itself. Okay, so looking at this detail, as you can see, it's beautifully done. No sign of flash or anything else around like that. Okay, see, it's showing its age now. It's got 2011 on it. As I say, it is a couple of years old, but again, just be careful when you're cutting out your sprues. Don't necessarily think, oh, that's the one, and cut it out, because it might be for a different version. Okay, but again, looking at this fuselage, you can see here it's got texture, which is absolutely lovely. It's going to take paint and everything really, really nicely. And we've got the little windows ports down there. And again, when you're looking on the inside, you can see we've got no ejector pin marks in this central core area at all. Okay, we've got it down here, but that's because you're not going to see it, but there's none anywhere where you are ever worried about them, which is a very nice touch. No problem with that at all. Very nice detailing around the front end. You can see on both of these, nicely done. And then obviously we're looking down here at some hosing, control surfaces, things like that. Again, absolutely phenomenal detail. And the last sprue, which is the one you look for flash on. Not that you're probably going to find any, but it's the one you can have a look. So what you've got in this particular sprue here, this is the framework from the outer one and the formers for all the inside and all the ribbing detail and absolutely everything else like that. So again, having a bit of a closer look, as you can see, you have got ejector pin marks. There's obviously no way you're going to get this out of the frame, so these will have to come off. But if we flip it over, as you can see, taking these out, you have no problem at all. And it's a very fine framework on these. Okay, and working your way through. And again, things like these, when you're looking at these, you can see you've got a little ejector pin marks here, but you're going to be looking at this side, and that doesn't have any, so you don't have to worry about it at all. But generally, no sign of flash on any of those whatsoever. The ejector pins actually have them, have a little bit of flash, but none of the parts actually do, which is a really nice touch. Again, you know, it's another fantastic Wingnut Wings kit. Grab the box, you know, something a little bit different. They're certainly working through all the different versions of things now, so you know there isn't going to be many gaps in the World War I market for this type of thing, but it's absolutely fantastic. The Wingnut Wings, if you haven't heard of them and you haven't built one of their kits, they're around about $100, so what's that in our money at the moment? Around about sort of 70 quid, 60, 70 quid, so it's quite expensive, but they do build up to 1/32, quite a substantial thing, and obviously you've got everything you're going to need to it. The only thing you're going to have to add to this really is a little bit of wire or sort of elastic thread or something for the rigging, but out of the box it's no problem at all. There is aftermarket bits and pieces available for them now as well, which is a really nice touch. But if you are thinking, you know, you want to have a go at a sort of World War I aircraft, think Wingnut Wings, because I did. I was terrified of it, but literally I built one of theirs. I did the Sopwith triplane, absolutely loved it. It's a phenomenal kit. The engineering is brilliant. It goes together really, really well, which then makes it a pleasure to build instead of fighting with the kit, especially when you get something like a biplane with geometry of wings, rigging, stuff like that. If the kit goes together well, it really does to help out. So there we go. That's the Wingnut Wings Roland C2A late version. Fantastic kit. Go and get one.